Hello and welcome back to It's Tadpole MMA's breakdown videos. First of 2021, we've got Max Holloway versus Calvin Kattar this weekend. I did a video a couple of days ago just kind of recapping my 2020 record. If you want, you can go back and watch that. For now though, looking ahead, first card of 2021 and I am excited. It is a good one. So we'll drop down to the first fight of the main card, straight into it. We've got Punaheli Soriano versus Disco Totorovich. Soriano is 3.11 times on verdict and $2.23 at the bookies. Totorovich 1.47 times on verdict and $1.63 at the bookies. Two undefeated fighters here. Dusko is slightly more experienced at 10-0 compared to Puna at 7-0. I think these guys are really well matched. Both guys seriously powerful, big knockout artists. They throw with bad intentions. Puna probably a little bit more reckless. I'd say Dusko is slightly more technical of the two, throws the tighter shots and has the nicer angles. From what I've seen, Totorovich will wait on the cage, kind of bait his opponents out of their guard, and then throw his strikes. So he has a really solid clinch game, really solid in close, and he's strong. Soriano is a wide-built guy and also strong, but I think Dusko edges him there. As for speed, pure hand speed, I think it's a bit of a coin flip. Probably Soriano ever so slightly, but not by any sort of crazy margin that I think is going to impact the fight. Neither of these guys do much from a kicking perspective either. Totorovich will touch the legs a little bit, and both can hit the high kick occasionally, but more boxing-oriented pressure guys who do implement wrestling games. I think that Soriano has the better takedowns, explosive double legs, he really gets in deep. But Dusko definitely more frequent with his shots. He'll go to the well on more occasions, and he's kind of more happy for his takedown attempt to kind of result in clinch and control time against the cage, whereas Puna will prefer to either succeed in his takedown attempt and be on the ground or fight at distance. Once on the ground, both guys also have ability. 3 submissions in Dusko's career and 2 for Soriano. And, on tape, I've actually seen both guys be able to keep their opponent down, manage to mount offense, whether that be submission attempts or ground and pound. But going back through the fights, watching Dusko fight Dequan Townsend and finish him on the ground just kind of settled for me that I think he has a greater finishing prowess on the mat. That brutal ground and pound from Dequan's guard in the second frame to finish the fight was really nasty. And if I'm looking at the skill sets on a whole, I overall do just think Totorovich is the better fighter. He's got a knockout win over Michel Pereira just over 2 years ago, which is aging like a fine wine. And when you take into account the veteranship of Dequan Townsend, however awful he might be and not really at this UFC level, Dusko's wins do just carry more weight. Punaheli couldn't get Jamie Pickett out of the cage in his Dana White's Contender Series fight, and Jamie Pickett is not UFC standard. And then, Soriano's win over Oscar Pichota was a fantastic win. Oscar himself, he's a good fighter, but he too is now on a 3-fight losing skid, losing all 3 via finish. So, I just think that Todorovich's wins are better. Soriano does have the power, does have skill, and he can end this fight. His left hook has a license to kill, but Dusko's the calmer head. He has better fight IQ, he has better technique, and I think he can work a more patient game plan to find his big shot. And as a result, I think he can put Punaheli out. Soriano can be a bit reckless. And if you're looking at the verdict odds, a decision for Totorovich is only 2.27 times, which is a little short for mine, especially kind of considering the ferociousness in which these two throw hands and engage. So I'm actually going to take a knockout for Totorovich at 5.04 times, and I'm going to play that in the third round. Of the verdict users thus far, 20% predict Dusko by a knockout. However, only 3% think it's going to come in the third round. We did see Totorovich turn it up in the last round of his Dana White's Contender Series fight, even though he didn't get the finish. I feel like the longer this fight goes, the more we see it favour Dusko, hence the final frame play. Enough said. On to the next one. We've got Joachim Buckley versus Alessio de Kiriko. Buckley is 1.18 times, and $1.33 at the bookies. Alessio 6.57 times on verdict and $3.25 at the bookies. It's a pretty tough line to entertain if I'm being completely honest. I do like Buckley. I think he's a solid fighter. He has a good skill set and obviously a really dangerous striker. But fuck me, he's a public play. Lots of limelight on him following that knockout over Kasanganai. And he's a very polarizing personality in his interviews. I think people see his name, recognize it, add him to their ACCAs, choose him purely based off what they've seen. And, on the contrary, Kiriko, a relatively unknown fighter, and that is for good reason. He isn't very entertaining to watch. I don't think he's a very high caliber fighter, and he doesn't have many wins, let alone finishes at this high UFC level to get his name out there. Buckley has advantages in hand speed, power, versatility, the trifecta there for him. He kicks more, has a good taekwondo base that allows him to really turn into his leg kicks or go up high with roundhouses and question marks, as well as spin like that highlight knockout. Kiriko does have some tools. He kicks the legs. His boxing's okay. His kind of takedown defense and defensive wrestling is there. But everything that he has is all just below where Buckley's at. He has no urgency at all in his fights. He does not pressure, especially not when he needs to. He's extremely susceptible to getting backed up. Hasn't really shown me a single thing I look for when choosing a guy aside from durability. 3 wins in the UFC. His best win was over Julian Marquez. I like Julian Marquez. I think he's a good fighter. That's Kiriko's best career win, but it was a split decision. It was a pretty close fight, and his other 2 wins in the UFC are literally cans. Bam Gabosa and Gareth McClellan, both guys who went 1 win, 4 losses in their UFC careers before getting cut. So at the end of the day, Kiriko 3-5 in the UFC. I expect him to fall to 3-6 here, en route to Dana White kind of culling another low-class fighter on this streak of roster cuts. I think Buckley is going to throw caution to the wind throughout the fight, especially early, trying to find the chin and finish it. But like I said, the sole characteristic I can get around and applaud for Alessio is his durability. So I'm going to play Buckley via a decision at 6.07 times, alongside 16% of other people on verdict going with that outcome. It's definitely the value selection. Buckley is so short at 1.18 times, and the KO is the most popular mode of victory. It's 1.48 times, which just offers no edge. Plus, like I said, there can be a case made for this going the distance regardless with Kiriko's chin, so I don't mind the Buckley decision, 6.07 times. Moving on, middle of the main card now, really good slating. Jingling versus Santiago Ponzinibio. Jingling 4.66 times and $3.40. Santiago 1.27 times and $1.30. Yeah, awesome booking. 2 guys game as hell, both durable, both powerful, should be fireworks. And at these odds, Jingling is an extremely enticing pick. I found myself kind of questioning his ability following that Magny fight. He got schooled, and when I saw or looked back through the form lines after that, it's kind of, his form leading up to that fight wasn't exactly earth-shattering. The knockout over Zaleski dos Santos is good, but then what? A body shot knockout over David Zawada. A decision win over Daichi Abe. Not really household names, but after I went back and rewatched the Magny fight, I did cut him some more slack. Magny just executed his game plan perfectly, smothered Lee from go to woe, gave him no space at all, and controlled him in the clinch and on the ground, as well as even the distance engagements. But as a result from kind of that close quarters bout, Jingling just got gassed out, and Magny didn't, because that kind of conditioning reliant style is what Neil's made a career out of. But when I was watching, even though Lee was gassed, his head movement was actually still really good, and he was still looking to work his hands and throw explosive combos, but it just wasn't enough because Magny had already made his read. So yeah, just a point I wanted to make. Pretty much, when you're talking about what Jingling brings to the table, he's a good boxer, a nice lead jab, knockout power, has a granite chin. He can spend long periods of time in the pocket, because he trusts in his durability, and he's a really entertaining guy to watch because of it. Yeah, he's reckless, but that attribute kind of gives him license to fight in that manner. He does use his kicks as well. He digs the front kick to the body, has a high roundhouse. One thing of note he doesn't do is kick the legs that much, just something I've seen on the tape. Like he threw 4 against Neil Magny. Magny being the rangiest guy in the division, most susceptible to low kicks, you know. Ponzinibio fucking lit Magny's legs up in their fight, so again, just Jingling didn't really use that tool, and he doesn't use that tool that much. As for his grappling, he does actually implement some offensively. I would expect a level change from him in this fight. You know, whether he secures it or not is a different story. Ponzinibio is a strong guy, but it's just another layer as well, and I like seeing that guys mix it up, show another facet to their game, get their opponent thinking about more things than just the hands or just the legs. To Ponzinibio now, man, it's been a minute. The last time that he fought in the octagon, Tyron Woodley was still the king of the welterweight mountain, and you know, we were talking about Woodley being a contender for the division's GOAT. How the landscape has changed. It's been over 2 years since we've seen him, and you know, for good reason. He battled numerous injuries, but the most serious of them all was a blood and bone infection that just hit him for 6, really. From what I've read, it seemed that it affected his legs and knees the most. There was a time there where doctors were saying, you know, you might not fight again, could have forced his premature retirement from the sport. I'm glad it didn't, though, because Santiago Ponzinibio is one of the best 170ers going around. He was ranked number 7 in the division before his hiatus. His last fight prior to that was him slapping Magny around for 4 rounds in his hometown of Buenos Aires in Argentina. And winning this fight here would put him right back there to that number 7 slot. He'd probably leapfrog Magny, who's at 9 at the moment. As for his style, trying to liken him to someone we know or fight who has fought recently, he fights really similarly to Alexander Volkanovski. In my opinion, you know, a crouching stance, very busy hands, always moving them and fainting. Really compact with his movement. He loves to be on the front foot and pressuring. You know, he cuts off the cage really well. He offers no space. And then rattles in thunderous leg kicks, which then in turn sets up his boxing. He has a stiff jab, a really good jab. He's genuinely knocked people out with his jab, or just kind of rattled people. He rolled Magny's eyes back with a jab. He finished Gunnar Nelson with a jab. And he's really quick as well. He's quicker than Jingling. The biggest X factor in this fight, for me and a lot of other people, for everyone looking at this fight, is of course the size of his layoff and kind of the conditions he was suffering during the layoff. If we see the same Ponzinibio, he beats Jingling here pretty comfortably, I'm happy to say, and the 1.27 times price tag is therefore justified, but it's just a massive if. And you know, Jingling's not a bad fighter. He's gonna stick it with Santiago the whole way. You know, he won't go away. Heart of a lion, this man. So the 4.66 times multiplier is just a really solid play, but I cannot bring myself to do it. You know, seeing Lee drown on the back foot against Magny was the big thing for me. Even though he didn't fight poorly, he just couldn't cope with that pressure, and Santiago loves to execute that same style, and he's going to have Lee backed up here and cutting off the angles, and from there, being the more technical striker, I think Ponzinibio is just going to wait on the wilder Jingling attacks and kind of look for holes from that, in that manner, kind of similar to my read on the Totorovich Soriano fight, opening up this main card, in terms of having them against the cage and waiting for the wilder guy to blow his wad and look for openings, being the more technical guy. So yeah, Ponzinibio for mine, and via a decision at 2.85 times. Currently, I'm with the majority there. 35% of predictions have Santiago via a decision, so with the crowd on that. But I think that's a smart play. Co-main event now. We've got Matt Brown versus Carlos Condit. Matt Brown 3.86 times and $2.32. Condit 1.35 times and $1.59. A pretty cool co-main. That Jingling Ponzinibio affair could definitely slide into the co-main, but not salty with this at all. two old timers finally getting a look at each other inside of the cage. And, I'm going to roll with Carlos Condit here. And just because I'm saying that from the top does not mean that it is so cut and dry. I just think Condit's the better fighter. He's better staged to hang with the higher echelon of the division at this stage in their careers. 36 versus Matt Brown's 40. And, I think he has a skill set that can take out Matt Brown. Carlos is a really tricky striker. Extremely dangerous, but then really unorthodox as well. When I watch him, it's almost like he's uncoordinated. He looks like he doesn't have it going on. Like, he obviously isn't, but his movement just kind of gives me that vibe. He will move between stances as well. Spends the bulk of his time on the feet in southpaw in recent fights, which kind of opens up that left kick to the body, left kick to the head against an orthodox fighter in Matt Brown. He also loves to work elbows as well, especially on that step-in, which is something everyone knows Matt Brown for. Well, Carlos gets his own as well. The biggest problem for Condit is his takedown defense is terrible. He's been taken down at least once in 20 of his 23 WEC UFC fights combined. It's actually ridiculous. And, Matt Brown does actually look for the takedowns. He has good trips. He's pretty strong in close. And I 100% expect that a level change is buried within Brown's game plan for this fight. Court McGee, Condit's last opponent, didn't attempt to take down, and he lost a stand-up fight because of that. On the ground, Condit is very slippery. He has an active guard, a very active guard, has the ability to sweep and reverse positions, and between the two fighters here is the more threatening, more credentialed BJJ practitioner. So it's kind of a concept, an idea that I'm wrestling with here, going back and forth. I feel that Matt Brown will get a takedown or two in this fight, but kind of do I think he's good enough to sustain top pressure and look for subs, because that's essentially Condit's kryptonite, strong and heavy grapplers who chase subs. Prior to snapping his losing streak against Court McGee in his last fight, he was on a 5-fight losing streak, and the names there: Chiesa, Oliveira, Magny, and Maia, plus the title loss to Lawler, which is kind of irrelevant to my argument right now, as that was just a striking fight. Is Matt Brown a good enough grappler to do what those guys did, to do what Chiesa, Oliveira, Magny, and Maia did? Like I've already alluded to from the top, I think not. Even against those guys, Condit threatened and chased subs. He managed to reverse Oliveira in the first round there, had his back, hooks in, and sliding his arm underneath that throat as the first round bell rung. Another 15 seconds there, who knows what could have eventuated. And as powerful as Brown is with his hands, I feel Condit's going to have his number on the feet. Carlos only finished once by strikes. He does have a good chin, he is durable, and he's patient enough to be offensive whilst being defensively sound, like we saw in the McGee fight. And then I think if, or more so when, Matt Brown takes Carlos down, I think Condit's going to be extremely active down there and look for subs from his back, reverse position, and chase submissions. Even Ben Saunders had Matt Brown locked in a triangle in the first round of their fight for like 4 fucking minutes. Matt Brown's been submitted 10 times in his career. 10 of his 17 losses via a tap, which is wild. So yeah, even though Condit hasn't managed a submission finish since 2008, I just feel that the way this one plays out, likely with a grappling game plan from Brown and Condit's sneaky guard, plus the fact that Carlos has actually chased genuine submission attempts and been close in 2 of his last 3 fights, I think we've got some sneaky value here. So I'm going to run a second round submission for Carlos Condit at 29.46 times. We are well and truly with the minority on this one. Only 3% of verdict users predicting a Condit sub, 2% in the second round. So yeah, I like the play. I think there's a bit of history involved, and I think the styles match up for it. As for choosing the second frame, 6 of Brown's 10 submission losses have been in the middle frame, so a little bit of data to play from there. Main event time now: Max Holloway versus Calvin Kattar. Holloway 1.36 times and $1.56. Calvin Kattar 3.79 times and $2.39. Really awesome main event. Does the winner of this get the next shot at gold? whether that be Volk or Ortega. Those two probably fight or are fighting next, Potentially, for sure. I think if Kattar wins, likely he does get the next shot. If Max wins, maybe not. If you're following the path of Whittaker at middleweight, Max might need fucking 3 or 4 more wins to secure a title shot. Per Dana. Up to Dana's discretion, of course. Anyway, both of these guys really similar again. Both stand at 5'11", real tall for the weight class. Kattar has a bit of reach on Max, For his height, Holloway's got that negative wingspan, little T-Rex looking bloke. But both guys really good boxers, essentially. I think Kattar edges power. He throws with bad intentions, whereas Holloway, more of a precision guy, accumulative in nature. Both guys very fast. I think Holloway's quicker with his movement, but pure hand speed, I think, also goes to Calvin. Something neither of these guys had done much previous to their most recent bouts was use kicks, but we saw both of those guys implement them far more in their most recent fight. That would be Holloway against Volkanovski 2, and then Kattar against Ige. Of their two kicking games, I prefer Holloway's. I think he uses it more in combination to either help him enter with his hands after or to finish off a sequence with his hands. From what I saw, Kattar's kicks were more an isolated strike, a one-and-done type movement. In terms of kind of footwork, both fighters love to be on the front foot, look to be the aggressor. That is definitely going to be a battle within a battle of this scrap. Who can take the center and control the pace. And before going into this fight, I'm going to have to say Holloway's going to be that guy. And that's by and large due to his volume. He's usually always the first to engage and then usually the last to throw as well. The nature of that, it allows him to dictate the rhythm of his fights, which is what we see. It allows him to dictate where he stands, assume a dominant position on the inside of his opponent within the octagon. Kattar, like most fighters, is much better and much more dangerous when he's walking you down rather than being walked down. When he's backed up, his movement's worse. He doesn't have that lateral evasiveness as smoothly as someone like Holloway does. His head movement's not exactly great. And that big nose of his just loves getting broken. It's been snapped in both of his last 2 fights, and it's just a peach of a target for a sniper like Max. Of course, Calvin does have countering ability, but Max is a far better counter striker. And I think that's going to serve Holloway well when Calvin does advance, trying to get Max off of him. I think Holloway's going to be able to crack him with a few hooks in close. When I was looking back through the form lines and the fighters Kattar struggled with in the UFC, they're rangy boxers. Zabit Magomedsharipov and Moicano. And the Moicano fight was not close. Renato Moicano outlanded him by 75 significant strikes in a pure striking match. There was no takedowns attempted at all. That was 2.5 years ago. Of course, there's been growth since then, but 2.5 years isn't that long. I think Kattar's had 4 wins since then. Yeah, and people can tell me all they want about Calvin absolutely spanking the pants off Zabit in the 3rd round, and if it was a 5-rounder, Calvin would have won, etc., etc. And I would agree with you, but a fucking asthmatic could beat Zabit in the 3rd. His gas tank is trash. Calvin's not going to have an advantage in this fight as the fight progresses. Holloway's volume and conditioning is unmatched, and the way this levels up in my books just has me favouring Max. He's motivated, feels hard done by off that second Volk loss, and ready to ascend back to the glory, back to the heights of featherweight glory. And I think Holloway wins. As for a method, this reaching the scorecards does make a lot of sense. Kattar, never been finished by strikes. Holloway, never been finished by strikes. But something's just telling me that Max puts a stamp on this and finds a finish. Kind of feels silly to read into, but Calvin Kattar's nose on the reel has been a serious problem, and Holloway lands at a higher clip than anyone in UFC history, averages 60-70 jabs a fight. If that's well placed on the bridge of his schnoz, that's going to be problems. Plus, like I already mentioned, Calvin does throw with more heat. What that does is, when desperation becomes a factor, or even not. It makes him more susceptible to overextending on his strikes, getting too far forwards over his front foot, and then multiplying the effects of a counter strike. I think we see something special from Max Holloway this weekend. So that's it. Max Holloway, third round knockout at 4.44 times, 22%, a pretty small margin of predictors on verdict have Max by knockout, only 6% in the third round. As for the round selection, 4 of Max's knockout finishes have been in the third, including both of those ridiculously impressive title fights against Jose Aldo. I think a third round just gives him enough time to mount a considerable amount of damage, plus draw some desperation out of Calvin and the costly KO error. That's the call. And that's the main card done. Quickly wrap it up with some bets now. The multi per annum, multi per half annum. All these stats are in the description below. I'm going to have a rolling 2021 record, my record from 2020, plus then my combined career record on profits on each section, the multi section, the single play section, plus all my verdict and prediction data, statistics. This week, the multi, it's 2 legs, it's a double. Pretty, less than we usually go for. So, why the fuck am I talking so much? We've got Carlos Condit via submission or a knockout, and we've got Holloway by a knockout at 19.79 times. Well, times, still talking verdict. Fuck, I gotta finish up. Been talking too long. $19.79. As for the Condit leg, 28 of his 31 finishes have been via, or 28 of 31 fights have been via finish, 15 knockouts and 13 subs. And then if you look at Matt Brown's record, 17 losses total, 13 via finish, 3 knockouts, 10 subs. There you go with that. The Holloway pick, self-explanatory. Single plays now, I am going to roll. I'm taking that out of the multi, and Holloway by knockout at $5.50. Like I said, big performance. I think this is overs with 25 minutes to work. And then my other leg, my other single play, I'm diving into the prelims. I'm taking Nasruddin Imavov via finish, double chance, knockout or submission over Phil Hawes at $3.75. The money line on Imavov is already shortened from $2.30 to $2.18. Phil Hawes, his record's a little padded for mine. He's only ever had first round finishes in terms of victory. Imavov, extremely durable, only been subbed once, never finished via strikes. If he survives the heat in the first round, Hawes literally has no experience further. He's been finished in both of his fights that have seen a second round. Imavov, his record, 3 wins by knockout, 4 via submission. He's a well-rounded customer. For those who have watched my year in review video, you'll know I'm double dipping here. One of my worst calls, or the call that hurt me the most in 2020, was Jacob Malkoun to beat Phil Hawes, and he didn't, enough said. So yeah, sucker for punishment, but I am fading him here again to hopefully snag some profit. Yeah, that's it. I'm going to miss the midweek card, the Chiesa Magni card. I'll still do a verdict record, but I won't be doing a YouTube video. I'll be putting all my time into McGregor Poirier the following weekend. So be sure to catch me for that. If not, guys, thanks for listening. Hopefully 2021 brings on a lot of profit and a lot of fun and a lot of good fights to come. So yeah, thanks guys, catch up.